Battlefield vs. Call of Duty. A rare gaming rivalry that's decades in the making. And now, despite both franchises drifting apart as of late, the imminent launch of Battlefield 6 and Black Ops 7 seems to be reigniting the debate that lay dormant, only to hit a new high as developers are clearly trying to outdo one another. Battlefield returns to a grounded and realistic setting after criticism both games were getting a bit too goofy, and COD immediately follows suit, even canceling their plans to carry forward items from the last game. Warzone still props up Call of Duty in the Battle Royale space, so what does Battlefield do? Boom! A new Battlefield BR on the horizon. Then COD fully unveils their new game at COD Next, and Battlefield follows it up with their own post-launch roadmap and other news to try stealing the spotlight. Bringing us finally to Battlefield gearing up for their full release this week, and COD offers a free weekend to their entire game at the exact same time. It's clear that these two are at each other's throats, and thankfully, the players are benefiting from this reinvigorated competition in ways that we haven't seen in quite some time. But how did it go the last time that Battlefield and COD squared off in the octagon? Well, for that, we're gonna rewind to the beginning and cover this entire fight game by game. The war began way back in 2002. With the launch of Battlefield 1942, a World War II FPS developed by Digital Illusions CE, later known simply as DICE. And 1942 released at the peak of World War II shooters, with the likes of the Medal of Honor series taking center stage. But Battlefield completely shook up the landscape with its now signature gameplay featuring massive player counts consisting of infantry, tanks, planes, and other vehicles, really putting you in the middle of an all-out war in a way that other titles on the market just couldn't yet. But DICE wouldn't reign over the subgenre for long, as just the next year, in 2003, a new studio by the name of Infinity Ward, founded by many of the creatives behind the recently released Medal of Honor Allied Assault, would drop the first Call of Duty. And what set COD apart from many others, ironically, was very similar to what Battlefield did. It put you in the boots of a single, nondescript soldier just trying to do your part in iconic World War II battles, although in a more infantry-focused and directed campaign compared to Battlefield's open sandbox nature. And in the years that followed, both games would become franchises, releasing a new title just about every year. On Battlefield's end, they experimented with Battlefield Vietnam in 2004, followed by BF2 in 2005, then a console release of the second titled entry, marking the first Battlefield game to release on Xbox from its PC-only roots, and then even the first future-based game between the pair, BF 2142, would be released in 2006. But compared to Battlefield's constant experimentation with its setting, Call of Duty's early days could be seen as either stagnant or simply refining the genre, with its sequels, COD 2, COD 3, and their various expansion packs sticking within the World War II setting, although also bringing on another development studio, Treyarch, to help develop the third title, leaving Infinity Ward to work on future games in the pipeline. It's also worth noting that while early COD would generally feature the single-player campaign front and center, Battlefield was always more of a multiplayer game. But as online gaming began to pick up steam within the industry, specifically with the release of Xbox Live on the 360, Call of Duty would slowly make that part of its offering a larger focus. Which brings us to Call of Duty 4 in 2007, the game that changed it all, not only putting the franchise into the modern era for the first time, but also completely rebuilding the series' multiplayer from the ground up, introducing a lot of the core features that now, nearly 20 years later, is what makes Call of Duty Call of Duty. Perks, kill streaks, create a class, camos, prestiging, all brand new tools to help you run 6v6 lobbies. And while not the first COD with multiplayer, this was the first to really build it out, and COD just exploded in popularity as a result. But Battlefield wasn't too far behind, as in 2008, DICE dropped Battlefield Bad Company, the first in a new sub-series also set in modern times. But this one was different for more than just the setting, however, as it also was the first game to release with a major story-driven single-player campaign, which only furthered its direct competition with COD. But on top of that, what really set it apart was its new destruction physics. Later going on to be a series staple, players were amazed at just how much you were able to destroy on the map, completely reshaping the battlefield and adding yet another level of tactics and immersion to the game's large-scale warfare. This was also the first Battlefield title to really pick up steam on console, and alongside COD 4 and other FPS games like Halo 3 and Team Fortress 2, they both really defined this golden era of Xbox 360 shooters that so many people, including myself, look back on so fondly. And through this era of gaming, both series saw not only a ton of releases, but a ton of widely successful releases. 2009 saw Battlefield 1943 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, followed by 2010 with Bad Company 2 and the start of long-running COD sub-series Black Ops. Then 2011 continued COD's Modern Warfare series, and Battlefield would release BF3, another modern title that many point to as the series' peak. After that, 2012 saw Black Ops 2, and 2013 brings us to Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty Ghosts, which most in their respective fan bases would consider to be the tail end of their own golden eras. And when looking at this time in a bird's eye view like this, you can really see that the yearly release and variety of storylines and settings was COD's biggest edge over Battlefield. The fact that they still had those two development teams, IW and Treyarch, switching off, giving each team a full 2 years of dev time, while Battlefield only had the one team at DICE, led to the latter series slowing down and releasing more and more of that same style, which, to be fair, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, during this time, players who bought a Battlefield title knew exactly what they were getting. A game that let you take part in huge, large-scale battles that graphically still look pretty impressive by today's standards. Its destruction and vehicular combat made every step that you took feel like you were in a movie, as you and your squad worked with the larger team to help secure a victory. Meanwhile, Call of Duty, on the other hand, was far more focused on the individual, with smaller 6-person teams and much faster-paced gunplay that let you feel like a super soldier, mowing down enemies, calling in Harrier strikes, and maybe, if you were extra lucky, a nuke or two. But despite offering different types of gameplay, they were still each other's biggest competitors in the military FPS genre. And if you were around back then, you were either a Battlefield fan or a COD fan. Those were just the rules. But this rivalry may not have actually been as equal as you may have thought back in the day, as just sales-wise, Call of Duty was dominating in this era, with a peak of over 26 million units sold with Modern Warfare 3, the big finale to its iconic trilogy. Meanwhile, Battlefield sales capped at around 15 million with its third numbered entry, which is still a monumental feat, but just not quite hitting the kind of records that Call of Duty was at the time. And that brings us to the tail end of the 360 generation, where both franchises would leave that Modern Warfare setting behind and start branching into different subgenres for a bit. Unfortunately, to pretty mixed results. In 2015, we saw Battlefield go in a bold new direction, away from modern military shooters and now into police shooters, with Battlefield Hardline, a game that, while not terrible, just didn't live up to the standards left by the previous games. This was also one of the only Battlefield titles not directly developed by DICE. Instead, Visceral Games, who was responsible for a handful of DLC over the years. Now, it's possible that this move was a play to combat COD's multiple studios approach, but ultimately, fans fans just didn't respond well to this new take on the series, and they went back to DICE being the main dev from here on out. Following that, however, was a brief respite with Battlefield 1 in 2016, a return to early 20th century conflicts, only this time to the First World War, a setting that neither franchise had really touched before. And while many of the newer fans who jumped on the train through the modern games were initially off-put by the change, the marriage between new school gameplay and graphics with the old school setting created not only a great game, but a pretty unique game that still stands on its own today. In fact, by all public mentions of either game franchise's sales figures, not only was Battlefield 1 the most sold in series history, but it also completely smashed Call of Duty's figures that year, a complete shift from their positions in the 360 era. The next Battlefield wasn't for another 2 years, however, so when trailers for the newest Battlefield 5 began to release, all eyes were on them to see if they could maintain this bit of momentum. But unfortunately, this title left many fans feeling that they lost the plot, returning to World War II, but seeming to throw away any sense of realism that many hardcore fans were looking for. Wrap all that up with some pretty lopsided weapon balance and lackluster maps, and you had a franchise that was so far 1 for 3 on this new generation. Similarly, over in Call of Duty land, the franchise also struggled for the next few years trying to find its identity again, as following the 360 era, COD brought in a third developer, Sledgehammer Games, to develop a new title for the series, Advanced Warfare, which thrust the franchise into the future in more ways than one. As the title suggests, it was set in the 2050s and featured new jetpack movement, adding a third dimension to every gunfight. And with a third developer now on the roster, COD had even more of an advantage, allowing them to keep up yearly releases, but giving their teams a full 3 years of dev time. However, that decision would immediately come back to bite them, as despite much of the fan base disliking this new advanced movement direction, by the time that Advanced Warfare did release and that feedback could be heard, they already had 2 more titles with it featured in the pipeline that had to be pushed through, leading eventually to Infinite Warfare, possibly the lowest point for the franchise in terms of popularity, which is where I mentioned Battlefield 1 came in to just dominate the sales charts. And that put Call of Duty into a bit of a tailspin, releasing a boots-on-the-ground World War II game the next year in 2017, then an almost hero shooter-based entry with Black Ops 4, seemingly searching desperately for a new angle, leaving fans in a place of disorientation, not really sure what to expect from year to year. But everything turned around for COD in 2019 with the reboot of the Modern Warfare series, a game that hit a big reset button, and just like COD 4 before it, served as the foundation for the franchise going forward. The biggest victory for them, though, was no doubt Warzone, the free-to-play battle royale element of the reboot, capitalizing on the recent explosion of that genre, and catapulting COD back into every gamer's cone of vision. Meanwhile, Battlefield 5 at the time also tried something similar, with their BR, Firestorm. However, due to it not being free to play and tied to a less popular game, it just didn't take off in the same way that Warzone did. And so, by the time that we hit about 2020, the conversation of COD versus Battlefield was more or less settled. Call of Duty was firmly back on top, with Warzone now putting them more in competition with games like Fortnite than games like Battlefield, something that wasn't helped by the Battlefield franchise hitting the brakes on yearly or bi-yearly releases too, dropping what was propped up to be their own return to form back in 2021, titled Battlefield 2042, which unfortunately fell flat as well. And in a lot of ways, what fans disliked about modern Battlefield was just how much they were changing to be like modern COD, ditching its traditional class system in favor of operators with specific abilities and trying to jump on the extraction shooter fad. And for a lot of the community, They just wanted Battlefield to finally feel like Battlefield again. And likewise, in the years since Warzone's success, a growing sense of stagnation was hitting the Call of Duty community, as because of the free-to-play game's integration with every mainline entry since 2020, that meant that every game had to fit into the same mold, and the kind of mass experimentation that we saw during the 2010s was firmly a thing of the past, without Battlefield or really any other similar FPS to push it out of its new comfort zone. And that more or less brings us to now, where the dust will settle on this newest incarnation of the rivalry, only time will tell. But we'll keep you in the know with our usual review roundup once the scores are in for Battlefield 6, and be sure to check back once BO7 releases to find out who won. But spoiler alert, it'll be the players. Thank you so much for watching, and let us know down below, which game are you playing this year? And of course, for more videos like this, check out GameRant.com.